Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Maytal Rosh. I am a Senior Director of Business Development at the Freeman Group. And today we will be talking about oncology non-dilutive funding opportunities. We're just going to dive in. I'll say that if you have any questions during this presentation, please feel free to use the lovely chat box that we have, and I'll try and address all of your questions. Worst case scenario, I'll contact you by email once we're done here. So here goes. I'll say that a bit about us. So we've been around for over 20 years now. We have about 85 full-time employees. We submit around 700 grants and government contracts every year. And we work with many different types of companies, many different types of stages of development for life science R&D. And we've definitely come across any type of project that you can think about. I'll say that out of all the many different indications that we target, oncology is definitely the #1 funded indication across the board, and I would like us to dive a bit into that. So the annual pool of funding that we consider the non-dilutive pool of funding available for us and our clients is around $60 billion every year, which is incredible. Most of it comes from within the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And when we say NIH, we talk about 27 institutes and centers. So the first one, the largest one, the oldest one is the National Cancer Institute. And no worries, we'll talk about that plenty today. In addition to that, just to give you an overview, we have the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, National Institute of Bioimaging and Bioengineering. By the way, relevant to you, even if you're doing an oncology project, it might make more sense to go after the technology side of things. We have the National Institute on Aging, we have the National Institute of Mental Health, and the list goes on and on. We have other HSS organizations such as BARDA, which is the Biomedical Research and Development Authority, the FDA, and the CDC. I'll stop with the acronyms now. Department of Defense, we have the US Army, we have DARPA, DTRA, CDMRPs that we'll talk about today as well, and other ones as well. We have private foundations. We have the Gates Foundation, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, JDRF, and other ones as well, patient groups. But the total is around $60 billion. I want us to start with talking about the different types of projects and stages of development that these grants support. So I'll say that they will help you fund any type of project from very early stage discovery types of projects with very little preliminary data, if any at all. Grants typically start with $200,000-300,000. And realistically, I would say up to about $500,000. We include the SBR Program and other NIH-related work. The NIH is R21, the National Science Foundation. We have DoD grants that are useful here, DTRA, DARPA, and private foundations. Next group of grants, at least the way we see this, is the preclinical work. When we're talking about either mid-stage preclinical all the way up to the IND stage, these grants typically range from $500,000 to about $3.5 million. And the funding sources are very similar. We have the SBR program, typically a phase 2. The R01 from the NIH, we have the National Science Foundation as well, the DoD, and all the other foundations there. And of course, we have the clinical stage funding. So I'll say that one of the great things about these programs is that they'll help you fund phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. Grants typically start with $3 million, and the sky's definitely the limit. You'll find that most of these types of grants don't even have budget caps to make sure that you do have that flexibility. And when we dive into these types of grants, we tend to look at 3 submission types. So the first one I would say is the more intuitive one, solicited opportunities. These address a specific area of interest, for example, cure breast cancer, cure prostate cancer, cure Parkinson's, you name it. And it's typically pretty straightforward. It's a specific funding opportunities, and we can find them across the board. We can find them with SBRs, R21s, R01s, UO1s. These are all NIH mechanisms, and many more. The second one is called unsolicited or investigator-initiated opportunities. With these types of grants, the idea is that you pitch your project to the funding agency. You won't typically see a specific topic saying, hey, cure this cancer. It's a bit more abstract on purpose, of course. And the idea is to not box you in into something they thought of before. And, because we are talking about cutting edge science, this is definitely a typical mechanism that we recommend using. Oh, sorry for that. That was a spoil. Oh, no, wait. Okay, sorry for that. Right, okay, so that's the unsolicited group. Third type is called BAAs, or broad agency announcements. These are typically large-scale solicitations, and we can find them mostly with the DoD and BARDA, but also the NIH as well. And these are wide as well. They typically fund clinical stage work. We don't tend to see budget caps with them. So yeah, these are the 3 types. When we look at the NIH's budget, I can tell you that the amount for this year is 52 billion, which is a ton. And if you look at the pie chart here, you'll see that most of that budget goes out to fund research projects, either internal or extramural work. But again, yeah, a ton of money, very, very, very nice. If we look into what they do with oncology, I can tell you that their budget increased by 41% since 2013. It is now $7.435 billion, which is a lot. And the reason I wanted to show you this graph is that every once in a while, every time an administrative changes, things happen in the world, I don't know, a pandemic of some sort, people tend to talk about shutting down these programs, decreasing their budgets. And I wanted to show you how steady the increased budget is. So you can see that, rain or shine, the NIH's budget increases, the NCI's budget increases, and we are very excited to be helping companies submit cancer-related projects because they are relatively fundable. Yeah, so that's that. I wanted to compare what happens in the NIH to what we see with the DoD. They have a program called the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, or CDMRPs, and these come out once a year. We'll go into that program, and I just wanted to say before we really dive in NIH and DoD, CDMRP specifically, are the top two places to find grants for oncology. And so far, we have a few programs that came out through the CDMRP program. And I wanted to compare what we see with the DoD to what we see with the NIH. So firstly, breast cancer is incredibly fundable, $150 million through the DoD, $834 million through the NIH. Lung cancer and ovarian cancer follows. With the DoD, we have $130 million for peer-reviewed cancer research programs. So these are the general oncology programs. Obviously, that's not as relevant with the NIH because they work a bit differently. But I just wanted to show you the amounts. So about the National Cancer Institute, again, it was the first institute with the NIH. Their mission, as I'm sure you could imagine, is to lead, conduct, and support cancer research across the nation and advance scientific knowledge and help people live longer, healthier lives. Their budget for 2022 is $6.9 billion, which is incredible and a pretty significant increase compared to 2021, 353 million extra. Again, these are incredible amounts. So in terms of the research, basically, we are talking about collaborations with the private sector, life science companies and life science companies, and helping them advance promising innovative technologies that fuel improvements in detection, diagnostics, and treatment of cancer. So again, with the NIH, we'll probably be talking about solicited or unsolicited opportunities. I'll say that although, if you look up NIH opportunities, you'll see many of them, but I want to point out that around 67% of the awards that the NIH allocates go out through these non-solicited opportunities. If you do want to know if what you're doing is more or less what they want to see, they have something called NOSI, which is Notice of Special Interest. So make sure that you look up NOSIs. I love that name. I love that acronym. And it gives you a clearer picture of what it is that they're focused on. So this is how you find funding opportunities. You go into the NIH's website. They have a search tool. You can just add keywords, make sure that you look at parent announcements as well. And let's maybe start with parent announcements. So across the NIH, we see that they have a few funding opportunities that are available to all of the institutes or most of the institutes. First one is the SBIR, which is the Small Business Innovation and Research Program. Typically a phase program, so you have a phase 1 and a phase 2. And make sure that you're distinguishing between preclinical and clinical opportunities. You have small grants for clinical and small grants for preclinical, again, with the larger ones. Make sure that you're submitting to the right one. I will say that they write very specifically clinical trials allowed or not allowed. So make sure that you're submitting to the right one. So that's SBIR. SGTR is for collaborations between the industry and academia. Same for the preclinical and clinical programs. Make sure that if you're conducting a clinical trial, you're submitting a grant that allows for clinical trials. Otherwise, it is, trust me, very, very upsetting. And the last one is an R01, which is the large research grant with the NIH. But this is an R01 for preclinical work. So if you are submitting a preclinical R01, you can do it through the general one. There is no specific R01 for the NCI, for preclinical work, of course. And I'll say regarding regarding the SBR and STTR program, I just want to clarify a few elements of the program that I'm typically asked. So as I mentioned, it is a phase program. You have a phase 1 and a phase 2. Additional submission options include a fast track, which is a phase 1 and a phase 2 combined, and a direct phase 2 if you've done a phase 2 equivalent amount of work. So for example, if you're almost clinical and you need the larger grant, you don't need to go through the entire process, which might sound intuitive, but that option was actually closed for a few years. So we're very excited about that. Eligibility. So these are grants to support industry within the US. So only US small businesses, meaning under 500 employees, may apply. The majority of the ownership needs to be by US citizens or residences. And the available funding, or the entire SBR program, accounts for 3.65% of any agency's budget by law. And I just want to point out a few restrictions. So firstly, just to make sure that it's clear, the work needs to be done in the US entirely. For the phase 1, you need 67% of the funds to be allocated in-house. For the phase 2, 50% allocated in-house. Technically speaking, no virtual companies are allowed, but there are ways to get around that, meaning if the company is virtual, obviously it's a bit problematic to allocate most of the funds in-house. If that is the case for you, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll be happy to discuss that. You also need a commercialization plan. So unlike a lot of the of these grants that mostly target the project, the scientific part, with the SBR program, they look at the entire company. So make sure that you discuss that as well within the grant. So these are the specific NCI solicitations. Firstly, they have an R21, which is called Clinical and Translational Exploratory / Developmental Studies. Again, clinical trial optional. They also have a clinical R01. I hope you remember that I mentioned that you cannot submit cancer-related project through the general unsolicited grants. So this is the NCI's grant, National Cancer Institute Investigator-Initiated Early Phase Clinical Trials for Cancer Treatment and Diagnostic. And they also have an R01 for industry academic partnership. So if the work that you're doing is a collaboration, we recommend going after this grant because it is specific, because typically if they have a specific opportunity that is relevant to what you do, it is something that they are interested in. So make sure that you utilize that. So I just wanted to mention a few solicited opportunities. So you have basic research in cancer health disparities. You have exploratory grants in cancer control, innovative research in cancer nanotechnology, microbial-based cancer imaging and therapy, bugs as drugs, which is a wonderful, wonderful name. So these are just to name a few. I found 87 of them that were open on Monday. I do think that the number should be similar until now. But I would definitely recommend going through the list and making sure that you are submitting to the most appropriate funding opportunity for you and your team. Okay, so now let us talk about the DoD. They have a program called the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs. The CDMRP is open once a year, typically around the spring. So they just started issuing them a few weeks ago. Most of them are not out yet. Only a few are, and I'll mention them. We love the CDMRPs. They're great. Their scope is very wide. And I can tell you that their mission is to eradicate disease and support the warfighter. However, their scope is very wide because they also take care of veterans and their family members. So, they do a lot of projects that are counterintuitive in a way because, you think DoD, you think about weapons and helmets and war, but they actually do a lot of different things as well. So in this type of applications, they would ask you for military relevance, and it needs to be relevant to the healthcare needs of the military service members, veterans, and beneficiaries. So as I mentioned, the scope is very wide. Their budget for 2022 should probably be around $1.5 billion, pretty significant. And unlike the NIH, and I'm sure you saw that it's pretty general at times. With the CDMRPs, the programs are organized in specific indications. So they reissue the program every year and they change the topics every year. But what we typically see is a list of topics, and for each one of these topics, different mechanisms that the specific topic uses to support projects. So the first step is definitely to take a look at the list of the topics. Yeah, so that's regarding the military relevance. Again, scope very wide, variety of different programs, variety of different needs, which is great. Every once in a while, if you'll hear silence, I'm taking a sip of water. I hope you don't mind. Okay, so their review process is a little different. It's a two-step program. First part is called a pre-proposal or pre-application. You're submitting a very short summary of your planned activities. And it is typically a few pages long, nothing more. You send that over and the application gets reviewed. I'll say that this is one of the most critical steps because it is very hard to be precise, interesting, and be able to explain why the work you do is so amazing in a 3-4 page document. At that point, the pre-proposal is reviewed, and if it is approved, you receive an invitation to submit the full application. That is definitely great because you don't have to work very hard and they don't have to work very hard unless they know that they are interested. So only at that point, once you're invited, you need to actually work on the full application. It is obviously the bulk of the work. Doing a full CDMRP proposal is not something that's a light type of task. Definitely worth it though. And at that point, the application gets the full review, judged by a scientific panel of experts, of course, and then you hear back. So that part is called contract negotiations. It's basically back and forth with the committee, with the program officers, until there is agreement regarding the different elements of the work, typically around the budget as well. They come back, they ask questions, and you hammer out the details until all parties are happy, and of course, scientifically speaking, the work is able to be completed, and then congratulations, you have an award. I'll say that so far there are only a handful of oncology programs that were announced. The most important one is the peer-reviewed cancer research program, which includes, for lack of a better way to put it, everything else. So they would just tell you, what is your cancer project? If it does not fall within one of the specific ones, please let us know. You have the breast cancer research program, typically the largest one they have. And by the way, the only one that is typically available twice a year. which is very interesting. Ovarian Cancer Research Program, Lung Cancer Research Program. As I'm sure you can see, they are very interested in solid tumors. They have other types of cancers that they support, no worries. But I would say that that's a big focus area for them. Okay, so where do you find all of this amazing CDMRP information? Two options. So firstly, the CDMRP website. I added the link here. This is what it looks like. You can find funding opportunities, other information, and of course, news. An alternative to that is the eBRAP. That is basically the submission system for these programs. You can also find all of the specific guidelines, synopsis, instructions. We absolutely recommend reading the solicitations. I know that they are very long. Trust me, I read them all. Make sure that you're reading them carefully before you're actually submitting to avoid well, heartaches when you see that there's a problem. So if we take a look at the peer-reviewed cancer research program, their goal is, of course, to increase mission readiness and quality of life by decreasing the burden of cancer on service members, and of course, families, veterans, and the American public. In terms of the specific topics, I'll say that they have a specific list that they want you to hopefully suggest projects in. You can find the topic areas there. We'll have a pretty slide about it in a second. I will say that topics that are not fundable are mostly not fundable because they have specific programs that fund them. So anything with breast cancer, lung, pancreatic, prostate, ovarian, rare cancers, or melanoma are prohibited and will be rejected. Good news, if you're working on one of those, you'll have a specific program to fund the work through. Available funding for the general peer cancer program, 130 million for 2022. And as I mentioned, the work needs to be relevant to the soldiers and veterans and the military beneficiaries and or American public. So everyone. Yeah, that's the pretty slide I talked about. So these are a few of the topics that they listed. As you can see, it is very diverse, which is great. I will not read all of them to you, and I definitely encourage you to go to the eBRAP system or the CDMRP website and look them up. Okay, next. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the specific programs or the specific opportunities that they fund grants through. And I wanted to focus on two. So the first one is the IDEA Award. This supports innovative, untested, high risk, and potentially high reward concepts, theories, paradigms, and or methods in cancer research. The emphasis here is on the innovation part. So make sure that you are describing what it is that's new about the project, the method that you have, and why is this very different from what is typically done. The budget is up to $400,000, up to 2 years. The pre-application is due May 25th, and the full application is due July 11th. I couldn't emphasize more that if you are interested in these types of grants, you cannot miss the pre-application deadline. Again, this is a once-a-year thing. Second one is the Impact Award. Supports hypothesis-driven, high-impact research, more advanced work, of course, within their topics. And this is a larger grant, $1 million over 4 years. The pre-application is due May 25th, and the full application is due July 11th as well. Okay, next up is the breast cancer program. So as I'm sure you can imagine, their purpose is to end breast cancer, which is very dramatic. And of course, so is breast cancer, don't get me wrong. So that's what they do. Available funding is $150 million. It needs to include the military relevance, as I mentioned earlier. And they have 4 levels of funding: level 1, 2, 3, and 4, with level 4 being very exploratory and level 4 being late stage clinical trials. Lung cancer research program, $20 million for 2022. They have, again, in terms of the different opportunities, we do not know all of the details, and the different funding levels change according to the submission dates are change according to the specific funding level. So make sure that you look through the types of opportunities out there. Just look them up through the website. The mechanisms are the Idea Development Award, Clinical Translational Research Partnership Award, and Investigator-Initiated Translational Research Award. Last up is ovarian cancer. Ovarian cancer research program. They have award mechanisms that we'll talk about in a second. I'll say that the available funding is $45 million. The pre-applications are due May 2nd, and the full applications August 5th. So it's definitely right around the corner. In terms of the specific award mechanism, so we have the pilot award, up to $250,000 and up to 2 years. Clinical trial award, around 1.5 million, up to 4 years. And we have the smaller research award. We have the $250,000 and investigator-initiated research award from $6,000 to $8,000 up to 4 years. So just generally speaking, I want to say that if the goal is, of course, to maximize your chances for an award, we definitely recommend understanding what it is that the funding agency wants to fund. This goes back to my advice to actually read the solicitation, seek insights into the interests and goals of the funding agencies. But having said that, of course, you need to make sure that you stay the course and only go after opportunities that help you advance the team and advance the company and the projects that you have. Because if you are granted and it does not take you where you want to go, it's just problematic and obviously not something that works in the long run. When you're submitting the grants, make sure that you address your weaknesses. And if you see that you have gaps within the team, make sure that you find partners. So if, for example, you're trying to follow a specific protocol and you know that there are pitfalls, make sure that you say, hey, these are the issues, here's how we tend to resolve them. And the reason I emphasize this is that, you know, the people reviewing these grants will understand what you're trying to hide, and it just makes you look like you do not have solutions to the problems, which I'm sure that you do. So make sure that you are talking about that. Adding partners and consultants to the project does not make the team look weak. It actually makes you look better. So for example, if you're doing, even if you have a platform technology company and you do many projects, but for this specific grant, you're doing kidney cancer, make sure you have a kidney cancer expert or a kidney expert or someone on the team that is able to handle that part. And that is very important to the reviewers because their goal is to trust you in a way with their money. Before you actually submit, we definitely advise to identify all the relevant funding opportunities and make sure to select from within that list. And then, of course, plan and execute a long-term multi-submission granting strategy. Really submit as many grants as possible to as many deadlines as you can, many funding opportunities as possible in agencies. Yeah, so I'll say that that's more or less what we do. Help our clients find grants, help them submit grants, help them follow up. And yeah, that's me. If you have any additional questions, I'll look through the chat in a second. Feel free to write them down or email me after. Okay, so let's see what we have. So John asked for the link. Absolutely. That is why we recorded. We'll send you a link to the presentation and the slide deck, hopefully in the next few days. Okay, are the clinical stage grants available for Canadian institutes and companies? Absolutely. I'll say that with the NIH, you need to talk to the NCI and make sure that you are able to submit grants when we're talking about the clinical stage work. Specifically with Canada, it is relatively easy to fund work down there because, and I'm trying to find the best way to say this, but it's a bit easier for them to trust the science done in Canada. This does not mean that science done outside of the US and Canada is bad science, of course, but there is a slight advantage to that. So I would definitely recommend talking to program officers, and of course not giving up on the idea. If we're talking about the CDMRPs, I can tell you that they honestly don't care where you come from as long as the science is great. And when we have clients that are non-US, we do find that it's typically easier to go after CDMRPs. And this is, of course, a great time to be doing so. Okay, so I think that's it for now. Have a wonderful day. Keep safe, and thank you so much for joining. Goodbye.